Hi, this is Fred Fortson. In this short presentation, I'll explain a great feature available in today's long-term care plans. It's something very few know about, the partnership program. In 2005, Congress passed the Deficit Reduction Act. It did a lot of things, but one of its most significant accomplishments was the move in trying to save Medicaid. A large percentage of those who depend on Medicaid are senior Americans, and it was painfully obvious that if we didn't change Medicaid, it would bankrupt our country. Congress looked ahead at the coming retirement of 80 million baby boomers from the year 2011 to 2030. Looking at projected cost, there was no possible way Medicaid could pay for the potential long-term care expenses of a much larger senior citizen population. They saw that by 2040, there will be only 2 workers for every 8 retirees. Imagine, one 16-year-old for every 6 65-year-olds. Something's got to give. If I were to attempt to explain all the ins and outs of the partnership program, this would not be a concise review at all. So in keeping with a short presentation template, I'm going to highlight just enough of the partnership program so that when reviewing long-term care plans, you will have a basic understanding of this important feature. I believe that this feature alone will motivate many to get a long-term care plan in place. Here's an overview of the partnership program. To maintain the financial integrity of the Medicaid program so that the truly needy could continue to receive long-term care through Medicaid. It's really a collaboration between each state government and private sector insurance companies to save Medicaid. The states have amended their Medicaid eligibility rules to comply with this program. The overall goal is to motivate more people to purchase a long-term care plan so that a fewer number would have to apply for Medicaid. So let's see how the program works. One of the main differences between a partnership policy and a non-partnership policy is inflation protection. In order to qualify to be in the partnership program, a policy must adhere to certain inflation requirements to ensure that the benefits of your long-term care plan will grow to keep pace with inflation. The requirements vary based upon your age when the plan goes into effect. You become part of the partnership program by purchasing a qualified long-term care insurance policy. It's that simple. If you ever need long-term care services, the policy pays benefits. If you get to the point where you can no longer afford your care, or if your policy benefits run out, you become eligible for Medicaid. And please understand that each state sets its own criteria in determining Medicaid eligibility, as well as what services they'll pay for. So a person who is eligible for Medicaid in one state won't necessarily be eligible for Medicaid in another state. Also, if a person moves to a different state, the benefits provided by their new state may also be different. We'll cover more on this in a moment. Here's a big reason for the change in Medicaid rules regarding long-term care. This chart reveals who is spending the most on long-term care services. It's the federal government, not the private citizen. Between Medicaid and Medicare, 60% of all nursing home expenses come from state and federal governments. We already know, based upon claims history, that when 80 million baby boomers are added to the senior population over the next 18 years, half of them will need long-term care at some point in their life. It was clear that Congress had to put some new controls into place to protect Medicaid. Medicaid eligibility is affected by a person's assets. Used to be that the value of your home was totally excluded in determining Medicaid eligibility. The new law told states that they could not pay for long-term care services through Medicaid if an individual's equity interest in their home exceeded $500,000, even if the individual was otherwise eligible for Medicaid. Individual states may now increase that to $750,000. Congress also implemented penalty periods so that people would not be able to give their assets away one day and then qualify for Medicaid the next. Though there were restrictions already in place, they have been made even harsher by the Deficit Reduction Act. This Medicaid rule affects anyone applying for Medicaid coverage who needs long-term care services. The rules apply to any asset transfers made either by the applicant or the applicant's spouse. In evaluating asset transfers, states will consider whose assets were transferred, to whom, when the asset was transferred, and the purpose of the transfer. If the transfer was not within proper guidelines, the state sets a penalty period during which Medicare will not pay for long-term care services. Think about it as being placed into a penalty box for a certain period of time, and no long-term care services can be provided until you get out of that box. And many factors are reviewed in determining the length of your penalty period. The Deficit Reduction Act gave states the authority to look back at an applicant's finances for 5 years from the date that they apply for Medicaid. It used to be 3 years. If they see any transfers that are considered less than fair market value, it will create a penalty period. And remember, a penalty period is a period of time during which the person transferring the assets will be ineligible for Medicaid. Now, there are exceptions of this rule. We can discuss those on a one-to-one basis. There are special exceptions that apply to the transfer of a home. Here are some transfers that are okay with Medicaid rules. Transferring the home to the applicant's spouse or child who is under age 21. Transferring the home into a trust for the benefit of taking care of a disabled person under age 65. Transferring it to a sibling who has lived in the home in the last year and who already has equity interest in the home, or to a caretaker child who has been in the home taking care of the applicant for the last 2 years. Congress also created an escape hatch from the home transfer penalty. The penalty will be waived if the transferred asset is returned in its entirety, or the penalty period can be reduced if the transferred asset is partially returned. Here's one other important Deficit Reduction Act rule. Following the death of someone who has received Medicaid benefits, a state must attempt to recover from his or her estate whatever benefits Medicaid paid out for their care. Even so, the state must wait until the death of the recipient's spouse, and also cannot proceed as long as there is a child of the deceased who is under age 21. The new law also requires the states must attempt to recover funds from the Medicaid recipient's probate estate, and states even have the option of going outside probate and seeking recovery against any property in which the recipient of Medicaid benefit had an interest. This includes jointly held assets, assets in living trusts, etc. The point is that Medicaid is now required to get as much money back as possible from those who received Medicaid benefits. Now, by purchasing a policy that follows partnership program guidelines, you will be protecting assets that may otherwise have to be liquidated or cashed in to pay for long-term care expenses. This is a key provision called dollar-for-dollar asset protection. Let's use the example of David, who has a $200,000 partnership qualified policy. Under this program, the amount of long-term care benefits paid for by his policy is the amount of assets that can be protected from Medicaid. Therefore, David could have $200,000 in assets protected, and these assets will remain protected even after David passes away, so his assets are protected for his heirs. Partnership policies make today's long-term care plans very affordable. Using the built-in protections, plans can be bought that have shorter benefit payout periods. For instance, you can get a plan that pays for up to 2 or 3 years of care rather than 5 or 6 years of care, and at the same time, the worry of exhausting your long-term care benefits are lessened. Let me show you an example. Remember, under normal circumstances, your assets would have to be very small in order to qualify for Medicaid. If they are not, Medicaid requires that you spend down your assets before you could get covered. Here are some examples. Person A has $50,000 in assets, and his partnership qualified policy paid out a total of $50,000 in benefits. Now he will have $50,000 in assets protected for his heirs, an amount equal to the benefits paid out by his policy, and he's qualified to apply for Medicaid. Person B has $200,000 in assets and a $200,000 qualified policy. Should this person run out of long-term care benefits, Medicaid would protect $200,000 in assets, and this person too would be eligible for Medicaid. The person C example shows the maximum of assets that can be protected from Medicaid, $500,000. And person D shows someone without a qualified policy. This could be an example of someone who is now alone and needs long-term care expenses. Their assets would have to be liquidated and spent down to qualify for Medicaid assistance. It's important to understand that there are limitations to partnership policies. Remember, though you can get asset protection, Medicaid eligibility is not guaranteed for the future. Plus, you're still required to spend your income on any long-term care needs you may have. The partnership program came about to address certain issues. It was designed with a middle income earner in mind. It has built-in protections that will provide a safety net so that you don't have to purchase a Cadillac plan. It's there just in case you outlive your money or if your long-term care expenses become excessive. In a nutshell, it's your backup plan. In the decade following their inception in the 90s, over 200,000 partnership policies were sold. As of 2005, there were still over 172,000 active. To prove its worth, only 119 policyholders had exhausted their benefits. The goal was to have fewer people needing to access Medicaid. It's a plan that's working. In closing, I want to point out that not all life and health insurance agents are certified and qualified to discuss your long-term care needs with you, and it's not a decision that's made overnight. My goal is to provide you with enough information that allows you to recognize the need and to see your choices. Ultimately, we'll need to talk. The sooner we get to that point, the more you can save, and the better your peace of mind will be. Here's my contact information. Call or shoot me an email with questions. And by the way, click on the link at the bottom of this page to visit our long-term care website. Good links and good information.